partner in crime, Zach. Great to be back at DevTO. Had an opportunity to be here back, I think a couple years ago now. Kind of felt a little bit bad because it was a really fun presentation to do and a fun presentation to get prepared for. But I didn't really leave anybody with anything. So we've got a couple of things that we've assembled that hopefully people can put together and use by the end of this presentation. We did a dry run of this yesterday, and it took us about 4 hours. We're going to try to condense that. It was about 4 hours, right?
Yeah, about four and a half.
Down to about 15 minutes. So we've got some JavaScript and a few CSS things that kind of getting into a bit of code at the end. But I want to throw a few high-level concepts on at the top. A bit of a bizarre title, I know, but kind of what's been guiding how we've been looking into this is just in general talking about user experience, human-centered designs, how we interact with these web browsers and these web experiences. At B-Notions, we don't get an opportunity to do like too much like web stuff, doing a lot of applications and mobile and that type of thing. But we still like to kind of get our hands dirty with this stuff and dig in the code and create some cool stuff. So a few things that we just want to put on the radar first. A few things to consider. Number one, just talking about the internet as a whole. I kind of see this, as an era where we're transitioning from something that was strictly utilitarian, so talking about the advent and the birth of the internet, it definitely had a very functional purpose, to something that's very much experiential. A lot of the instances of our encounters online that we remember are usually very experience-based. Number two, more and more we are able to pay attention to how people use and consume content. It's very much a guiding aspect of how people interact with any piece of software or any type of device. Third thing is, and you're free to disagree with any of these, like I've got one of those, so we can hash it out after. The third one is, just asking the question, what are the qualities of a memorable web experience? Just throwing that out there, there's probably a few things that will come to mind. And number four, what we'd like to get to towards the end is kind of proposing a few ways to really formally look at the browser differently. We're going to notice some common trends of some things that we've all encountered on the web, but we've kind of like sectioned them off into a few kind of like fundamentally different, I guess, areas. So first of all, just kind of want to go through some examples when we talk about the internet that we love. And I'm going to let Zach do a rapid-fire 15-second review of some of these very lovable websites. So let's lead off with this guy. So Zach, what's lovable with this one?
So, well, I mean, one of the important things I guess with this is like when people are browsing like so many different websites, you spend a lot of time on the internet. You have a very short amount of time to capture somebody's attention. And so creating a memorable experience is really important. So what these guys have done is basically they've hijacked the scroll bar and have scroll-based events that translate across the page. And it's just fun and exciting. Every couple of seconds there's a surprising encounter. Now he's in a truck. I didn't expect that to happen. But you remember this experience. And you're going to remember what this product is about or what the message of this web page is. Yeah, so let's go on to the next. I'm going to go faster. So this is one you guys might have seen. It's an old one, but it's great. He's walking down the street. He's got speech bubbles coming up. He's telling a whole story about this video game that's really exciting. You can't help but continue to scroll down the page. Stuff happens. I think, look out, there's a train. It's very exciting. You get to the end, and then you want to download the game.
All right, next one.
Was that 15 seconds?
I think that was close.
All right, so this one, this is crazy. There's stuff flying around, things are rotating, and this is all based on like scroll wheel or scroll bar interactions. But they've really kind of like turned this whole idea of what a document on the internet looks like. Like this is more interactive than your regular web page. It's more engaging than a movie. It's not a flashlight. It's the next version of the internet.
Next one.
These guys are incredible. I'm sure you guys have seen this. Please tell me you've seen this.
Yes. I actually used this in my last presentation here, so I kind of feel bad about that. But like, this is something.
So this is just an informational website for like a beer tent meetup, and it's a perfect demonstration of how you can think about the internet as not just something that you scroll up and down through. It has depth if you want it to. It can surprise you if you want it to. Mario Kart. Everybody loves Mario Kart. look at this. So we're going horizontal. People normally don't like horizontal sites, but look at all the excitement that's happening here. The offset scrolling. There's just a surprise every 10 seconds. So you're definitely going to remember Mario Kart. If you don't remember Mario Kart already, you're going to remember Mario Kart after the end of this.
Last example.
Gmail. Actually, you want to talk about Gmail?
Sure. So the reason why I brought this one up, it actually might not be readily obvious. This is my spam box. The interesting thing about this, when Gmail introduced themes, they have a whole bunch of different themes available, but the thing that's really fascinating about this one, not only does it have an interesting art style, but one of the funny things about it is that the first time I activated this one, when you go and visit it during different times of day, it recognizes what time of day it is where you're at, and so this scenery changed right now. So based on the time of day, you can see in the background here, I've got like a bit of a dusk scene going on. And tomorrow morning when I wake up, it's going to be like an early morning sunrise type of thing, right? So like just recognizing the fact that based on how it was put together and the intent that went into it, I mean, there's something, you know, I kind of feel like there's a human understanding that I'm a human on the other side of things, right? So in terms of talking about kind of experiences that stick with you and resonate, that's one of them as well. So that, those are the quick kind of like examples that we wanted to run through to kind of give an idea of where we're coming from in terms of talking about things that we fall in love with, or things that are memorable, like the websites that you'd actually tell somebody else about. And so where I want to take this is I want to kind of throw it out there and at least formally recognize and have a discussion about what we have access to in the web browser. Just as a front-end developer, just as a JavaScript person, what is it that we actually have access to? And this segment of things, I kind of feel like I've, in the background, individually kind of been working on this for a few years. This was like my first ever stab back in 2010 at like releasing something to the public. I released this thing on Google Code because I was doing a lot of web development that was kind of contingent on screen sizes and understanding what was happening. So I came up with this little kind of like visible console that I could see just because I was doing a lot of stuff in different browsers. And I just find it helpful, like all this stuff is available, like you could like write some JavaScript in the console quick and kind of flesh it out, but I kind of like having this panel always available. And the reason why I'm bringing it up right now is because just like, this is only the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we have access to as a developer, but there's a lot of information here, right? And when we're talking about scroll bars and we're talking about being able to map a person's interaction and being able to do stuff with it, this stuff is all really readily available. And what we're going to be kind of pushing towards the end is figuring out and giving some more mechanisms that you as a, even a beginner kind of developer can start tapping into this stuff and start, letting the people on the other end of your interfaces understand that you recognize that, they're interacting with your stuff. So just taking a quick look at this, I can understand, I know what kind of platform is being used, I know what kind of operating system is being used, I know what browser you're in, I know what version of that browser you're in, I know how wide your window is, how tall it is, what orientation it's in. So if I were to kind of take this and switch it into, we'll just drop it into, it's still in landscape mode, so I know that if I go over there, it'll flip to portrait eventually. I know my mouse's X position, I know my mouse's Y position, I know where the position of this console is, and then just spit out the actual browser string, the way it identifies itself to a server. So we have access to all this information. However, it's just, we find overall in the internet, it's actually very rarely used. Right? We have access to all this stuff, and it's a very rich set of data, but it's not very frequently used. So, when we started kind of playing around with this idea, Zach and I were just starting to talk about, how we have access to mouse position, and Zach came up with this, his crazy interpretation when we started talking about, well, what would you do with mouse position? So I'm going to just bring a snippet of code up here, and then bring up Zach's example, and I'll kind of let him run you through it. Zach's not particularly proud of this batch of code, but I think it's cool because it does the trick. But here, take us through it, Zach.
Yeah, so basically what we're doing, actually, can everybody see those numbers up in the top corner? So you've got the red and yellow bars up there. Those are actually reporting mouse X and mouse Y. So they're actually, Mark wrote a little bit of JavaScript that I could basically take these variables and put them in inline CSS. And what we're doing right now is actually applying 3D rotations to a box with a couple of divs that have been offset. And so as you scroll around, as your mouse just moves, this animates. The reason it's doing a flip around like that is because there's a transition, a WebKit transition on the element. So it takes a second and then recalculates its position. So it's just kind of, I mean, it's kind of useless, but it's kind of fun just to see how you can map the user's interaction into the web page. So now all of a sudden, instead of this just being a picture of some triangles, this is something that I'm actually interacting with.
And so we're just kind of taking a flip through to kind of recap what Zach was mentioning. It's basically capturing mouse position and simply, something just basic, just taking that number that comes out of the XY mouse position and just mapping it onto a 3D transform, and then all of a sudden you get a very interesting effect, right? So like where and how this actually fits into an interface, not entirely sure just yet, but there's a lot of potential there just in having that aspect. So about to kind of dive into the real frameworks that we want to take a look at. Let me just check where I'm at with my slides. Oh, yeah. So what do we have access to in the browser? I already said that slide. So I'll talk about some opportunities to revisit our common web metaphors. But first of all, kind of where, personally for us, this started coming to an issue was, so doing a lot of web products, we were in the process of helping one of our partners launch this product back in the day. And so, again, going for those kind of like more elaborate web interactions where we've got some subtle animations happening, we understand where a user is, and a video becomes, starts running once they get to a certain part of the scroll. We get some stuff animating in there. And so it's the type of thing that at this stage of the game, we've all come across these types of experience, and they're all like, where I kind of, my barometer or my test with these things is, which websites do I end up scrolling back through, and then scrolling back through, and then scrolling back through, just because there was something interesting going on. There was some aspect of intrigue that was happening. So this kind of got us to thinking, and it was this site, and then there was about 2 other sites that we were working on that had the same mechanisms, and like, we had different teams working on segments, and we were like trying to build the same thing, having to rebuild it over and over again. So I started playing around with a few things just before Zach and I started talking, and I was jumping into CodePen one weekend, and I ended up putting this thing together, which doesn't really look like much right now, but this was kind of like one of the initial forays into what became one of the libraries that we're going to talk about today. So what you'll notice is that, first of all, as you'll see the scroll bar over here on the right-hand side, so that scroll bar is mapped to this green thing right here. So there's a one-to-one map between them, and also you'll notice that as the scroll bar gets to certain intervals, it's triggering the animation of these orange boxes into the scene. And after talking with a bunch of the team, we kind of recognized that these were the effects that we were looking to be able to kind of try to capture in a more predictable and a more manipulatable way. So we kind of identified at this stage like what it was that we were looking to accomplish, and that's when we really started. I kind of feel like that was the beginning of this presentation when we started working on this a few months ago. So just going quickly back to the presentation. What do we mean when we're talking about metaphors of the web? So the first one is actually kind of straightforward. So the most common web browser metaphors, the first one is a document reader, right? This is like, the prototypical, the first one, right? Some functions still function, some websites still function really well with this metaphor. Sites that have, an overarching emphasis on transmitting information from point A to point B, so your Craigslist, your news sites, your Reddit sites, they function as a tool that you can use to read a document, right? And they do that well. And so that's kind of like the initial metaphor for the web, something that we have a vertical scrolling implementation. The second one is web applications, also extremely common. We were introduced to something in our web browser. There's a bunch of panels. We can move information from point A to point B. We can see things happening there. But the next one, based on what we've just been taking a look at, that we'll present, is the concept of the web browser as film strip. And this might be obvious after seeing some of the other websites that we took a look at, but I kind of want to formally propose this as, another metaphor for the web that not only is common, but it's something that's very accessible. It's something that we can all use, and hopefully by the end of today's discussion, you'll have kind of like the confidence or at least some familiarity to be able to go ahead and use it yourself. So the basic metaphor is you're separating the web browser as a document reader and instead understanding the correlation between where the scroll bar's position is in relation to the full document size. Right? So if we were to take a look, you know, the top of the scroll bar, you're kind of at 0.0, the bottom of the scroll bar, you're at 100% of your way through the animation, and then all of a sudden this scroll bar becomes a playhead. Right? So if any of you have ever done any video editing, the whole idea of like scrubbing through the playhead is very much the same type of scenario. The web browser works very, very, very effectively and predictably this way. So the next thing that we put together, and the first one, so this stuff's actually, technically speaking, it is available online right now. One of my tech directors kind of like, he didn't fail me, like I passed his code assessment earlier today, but I've got some tweaks that I need to make to have this all tidy. But we're calling this, Zach named this one scenery.js, and I'll very kind of briefly run you through my corny version of what can be done with it. And this is all extremely accessible, so I'm scrolling all the way up to the top, and what you'll notice is that as my scroll bar, I guess we can't really see it here, as the scroll bar comes down, we can see that we've got an animation that's mapped to that scroll bar, and then we've got animations that are triggered at certain instances of the scroll bar. So this was my stab at, you know, doing a demo with what we're able to do here.
Does it scroll back?
It definitely does scroll back. So these guys all go back into place. This is approximately 8 lines of JavaScript to accomplish using the library that we put together. But using the same metaphor, I'll let Zach walk through his as well as his code. I'll just pull this up here. So Zach's nickname at the office is Michael Bay, because Michael Bay did Transformers, and Zach's very much renowned for breaking web browsers by being too ambitious. And so this was his stab at something non-box related. And I'll pull the code up here as well. We can take a stab at walking through this. Here. Which one is it?
It's
Which one is it?
you want
This
to,
one?
yeah.
Okay, cool. So after using the library, this is all Zach had to do to get this sucker going?
Yeah, that's it. So Mark wrote up some JavaScript, I wrote up some CSS, and basically all I really had to do is set this config file. So I've got a couple of cloud elements in there that I want to translate around. So basically what we're doing is choosing the property that we want to change. We're setting the start and end position, the units that we're actually going to be implementing. So like you can do, you know, pixels, ems, degrees, whatever. And then how far along in the actual timeline we want these events to actually occur.
And so one thing I'll just mention quick, we did kind of break this out so it's a bit more readable down here. So this is basically what you would do for those elements. You would say which element in your HTML file you want to have access to, which CSS property you want to be animating or adjusting, what the start position of that element is, end position, which units you're going to be using, and at what point in the scroll bar you want it to start doing its thing and where you want it to end. And so what that translates into in Zach's example is something that
Stream.js.
so yeah.
Yeah. So the whole idea, I guess, like the sort of the metaphor that we tried to go after was this idea of stage with actors. So actors are basically things that can kind of come in and interact with the stage and leave. We also have threads, which I don't know, this is the working title, I guess, for this kind of characteristic. So a thread is basically something that follows the scroll bar. So as I'm scrolling here, there's a couple of actors. One is the actual sky. So I don't know if you can see, but it actually changes based on the scenes that we set up. And then the clouds, they're threads. They're tied directly to the
Also
scroll bar.
extremely easy to put in a parallax effect using this library.
So I'm just transitioning from basically from scene 1 to scene 2. to scene 3, and then into scene 4. These guys keep on moving. And of course I can go right back. So all this took, well, yeah, if you go quickly it gets a little weird. But all this took from my end is basically setting up classes for all these, class-based transitions. So I have in my CSS, I have scene2.sun, has this position, has this scale, has this rotation. And the same thing goes with the background. This is just a great big, enormous gradient that I'm moving up and down. So based on every scene that the JavaScript returns, I've got CSS hooks in place to adjust all the different actors. So this is just one fun little example of how you can really hijack the browser experience and do something that's a little bit different. Yeah, it gets a little wacky in places, but the whole idea is that we're just we're using JavaScript to trigger class changes. Yeah. And using the class changes,
one thing that we can check out here is that what you'll notice is that it's actually like really fundamental when it comes down to it. You'll notice as we're going through the scroll bar, so the animation of the clouds is tied directly to the scroll bar. If you take a look at the body tag, all that's happening is that as I scroll back up, you see that the scenes are being removed. That's how we get the backtracking through things. So it's really a matter of like understanding where you want the actors to start and where you want them to end, and then taking advantage of those scene transitions in your CSS to basically dictate where it is that you want them to go. You'll notice one other option that we had in the config in our function is that basically you just generate movie by running this function and telling it how many scenes you want in your movie. So I think in Zach's he had 9 in his. And so basically all that does is it takes the height of your window and multiplies it by 9, so that just kind of gives you what your timeline is. So you can kind of basically have as many scenes in there as you want to. So that's the one library that we have. And then kind of going back to where we're at, the second metaphor that we'll talk about, we don't just have one, so that one's scenery.js. The other one is the web browser as a viewport exploring a larger area. And when I show some examples of where we've seen this before, it's probably going to be pretty obvious. But the whole idea of having a very, very large navigatable area and taking a look at our browser is literally a viewport that we're looking into and viewing this area, right? So, it's really not too much of a stretch to recognize some of the examples of where this exists. Obviously, probably the most abundant is just, the way Google Maps functions itself, right? Like we know that we can click and drag into these particular areas. It's something that we're really accustomed to in this circumstance, but very infrequently do you find it being used in other circumstances that we get on the web. Also, interestingly enough, it's really impressive how much of a difference maker Prezi turned out to be when it's really kind of just playing around with that whole metaphor. A large canvas in which this whole thing kind of plays the viewport of it, and just kind of playing around with zoom as well. But it's a very kind of straightforward metaphor if you take a look at it. So the second library that we put together, again, this is kind of like an example of it, is we've got this library called Tour Guide, for lack of a better word. It was actually called something different this afternoon until somebody mentioned that name was already taken as far as JavaScript frameworks go. But basically, I'll kind of walk through our library here. What you're able to do with this one, and just kind of going down into the implementation, is basically you're able to generate a new canvas. You can generate like a randomly sized canvas. You can have your canvas be a scale of your browser window. You can have, if you have an image you want in the background, you can set your canvas to be that size. You basically tell it how many destinations on the canvas you want to be interacting with, what the timing is between the destinations, and I'll kind of show you the example that Jack put together. Maybe you can kind of comment on some of these here. So I'll just load it up from the top. So basically we have this alternate reality version of the TTC map that somebody was kind enough to allow us to use. And this whole effect, if you want to walk me through that.
Yeah, so basically what we've got is I've absolutely positioned some destinations for this thing to actually move to. And on click, the destination gets a class of focus. The JavaScript moves that over. When the destination has a class of focus, the details bar and the little marker there pops. Transitions and animations have that effect happen. And then the actual motion is just handled by JavaScript.
And so in order to get this happening, it takes a few assumptions of what your HTML structure would need to look like. But for the most part, this is all the JavaScript that Zach required in order to get this happening. Right? So basically what we tried to do, we tried to take the concept that we were looking to accomplish. Zach, from a design perspective and from a UX perspective, just kind of like told me what variables he wanted to have control of and have access to, and we kind of built the framework around that. So kind of like the overarching objective of this is to try to make these types of metaphors and these types of experiences much more readily available and accessible, and kind of spread awareness that these things are possible within the browser. So ultimately, just being able to understand the size of the image being 3200 or 6800 by 3200, the time in between the destinations. All it really required in terms of how the destinations worked is all you really needed to do was kind of make sure that there was a link between what these links here were called and what their ultimate destinations were called, and the library just completely takes care of the rest. So that's kind of like our final metaphor that we're taking a look at. So again, just kind of going through and understanding that this whole concept of, again, this being our browser window, that same mechanism that has acted as our traditional document reader, and really kind of blowing the doors open of what you're able to do. So that's kind of where we net out. These are, like I said, they're all available. If you hit the links, there's stuff that you can grab and download. They're a little bit too close to completion for us to just give up and just like this be another project that never goes anywhere. So I think we're looking at putting together everything in a formal kind of GitHub circumstance with some demos that you can disassemble. But that's where we're at. And I would love to field any questions or take any thoughts or comments or concerns.